Hello and welcome. This is Lisa Jones, and you are listening to the Exploring Death podcast. Hello and welcome to the Exploring Death podcast. I'm Lisa Jones, your host, and today I have with me Sandy Alemian. She feels that we are all like Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz, having the power within us all of the time, but not knowing it. As a spirit medium and soul coach, Sandy guides her clients through spiritual awakening after loss. She's also the author of 2 books, Congratulations, It's an Angel, and What Was God Thinking? And I am so looking forward to talking to Sandy. So welcome, Sandy.
Thanks, Lisa. So awesome to be here. I love where you're at. It's beautiful. Makes me want to be there.
Yes, living in Maui definitely has its advantages. And that's sitting out on a beautiful deck with this beautiful background behind me. And as I showed you earlier, the ocean is just over my shoulder. So
stunning. The ocean is my happy place. It's my home.
Yes, for me too. I've ever since I've moved here, I try to get down there every single day and take a little dip. I'm not a big swimmer, but boy, I call it my baptism every morning. Just get in, get wet, float, and get out.
So healing for me with the ocean, right? Because it's so expansive. Yes. And it just reminds me of our energy, how big it is.
For sure. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, let's get started. Can you tell everyone listening, so what happened for you that really woke you up to this experience of working with death and being in this realm of helping people?
So ever since I was a kid, I was always terrified of death. Terrified of it because it seemed like this big dark hole that people fell into and you'd never see them again. And I always thought God was up there somewhere, but I didn't know where. And I was terrified of something ever happening to my parents. And so I remember as a kid thinking, if I just make it to when I'm 20 years old and something happens, then I'd be okay. I'm 20 and I'd be able to deal with it. Then I got to my 20s. I'm like, okay, just get me to 30 and, then I'd be okay. Because death was like this big unknown. And then when I was 33, I was pregnant with my second daughter. And she was born with what they thought was a 1 in a million metabolic disorder. They really didn't know what was going on with her. And she was having some seizures, but they said seizures are quite common in newborns. And they wanted to send her up to the NIC unit, the neonatal intensive care unit, just to run some tests. And they found that every test that they ran was fine, except for EEG patterns that showed she would have a seizure, and then there was no normal brain activity. No one ever used the words brain damage at all. But I knew, Lisa, because I've always been a positive person. I knew if I just prayed hard enough for her, if I just had enough of us sending positive energy, I knew I could make her better. And I knew someday I would be on Oprah with my miracle baby talking about the power of prayer. And what I found was sometimes there are experiences that you go through in life that are not in your control. And this was one of them. And Talia ended up dying at 31 days old. And that was my first experience with a major loss. It completely broke me down, broke me open. And what I found when I was broken open, I found a connection to spirit, and I found a connection to God like I had never experienced it before. And that's when I started sensing things and feeling things, getting my first message from Talia through my writing 2.5 weeks after she passed. So that's what got me onto this journey of truly being a conduit for spirit.
Wow. That is, like you said, I totally understand that feeling of like, I'm going to create a miracle by just, calling in all the positive energy and the prayers. And I mean, that's because I think so many of us in the spiritual field, think that we can just like control everything. Right.
Right.
But when we can't and things are beyond our control, that's when we just realize it's not us doing anything, right?
No, and the interesting thing was, I'll back up. So Talia was my second child. And I went on to have a son exactly a year and a day later. But before my first daughter was born, I had been writing with my angelic team for about 5 years, getting angel messages. And not once was I ever warned, Sandy, this is what's going to happen. You're going to have Ariana. You'll have 2 miscarriages. Then you'll have Talia. She's going to die at a month old. And then a year later, you'll have Austin. I wasn't warned. And I understand now, like my clients come to me saying, what's going to happen? Tell me what's going to happen? What's going to happen? And I understand that we're not always meant to know, because if someone had told me that, if I had been warned ahead of time and I was told, Sandy, this is going to be your experience. You'll have Ariana, and then you'll have 2 miscarriages, and then you'll have Talia, who's going to die at a month old, and then a year later you'll have Austin. I would have said, I'll take the beginning and the end of that journey, but the middle stuff I'm not strong enough for, because I totally did not think I would ever be able to handle going through the loss of a child. And so I really understand why we don't always know what's going to happen, because I truly believe that this was on my soul contract with Talia, that she was contracted with me to come in, shift my life completely, and gave me a mission to serve people here.
Wow. That's beautiful. And I think that it brings me into a question, because a lot of people ask me, and I really have to honestly say, I don't know the truth. I mean, I somehow come up with something to say, but people want to know, like, why would that happen? Like, why would God give you a child and have her die at 31 days old? And like, if God is all powerful and can do all things, like, why do any of those things happen? Why do we have to suffer like that?
My understanding of it is, this life won't make sense if we're just looking at this life, right? So if you look, I look at, I've done a lot of past life work, and I'm also a hypnotherapist, so I do past life work with other people. And I've seen that I've lost children in other lifetimes. And I've seen how I did not handle it very well in other lifetimes. And when, after Talia had passed, something struck me that said, oh my God, I'm doing a do-over. I must have said, hey, coach, can you put me back in again? Now, from our human understanding, that would not make sense. Why would I ever choose to go through that again? It doesn't make sense on a human level. It only makes sense when you back up and you can see it from the perspective of your soul, because your soul sees this as, how can I get past this? How can I move beyond it? How can I heal through this? And so it will keep experiencing similar things, either in this lifetime or lifetime after lifetime, so that we can go, let me see if I can do that differently. So I don't believe that any of these experiences that we go through are meant to victimize us, although we can certainly feel that at times. When I was going through it, I'm like, why is this happening to me? Was I not a good enough mom to Ariana? Those are some of my first questions. And it was only until I started receiving the information in my writing about death, and how death is not the end. Death is simply the transition from being a spirit with a body to spirit without a body. I just got goosebumps.
Oh my gosh, my whole body did too.
Yeah. So I see death completely differently than I ever did before. It doesn't look the same when you look at it from the soul's perspective. You understand that?
Oh, absolutely. And I totally feel the same way, that, this was a do-over for me, because in past lifetimes,
Wow.
I've lost many spouses and parents and all of that. But this time it's like, yeah, this time I'm going to shine light on death and talk to people about death, and that it is an illusion, and that we don't have to look at it in the old way that we've always looked at it, and by shining light on it, it's like, oh my gosh, this is just a temporary experience. And it's so painful, and it's
so
and
painful.
Our society, especially in the United States, is very much, we've removed it. We've tried to, institutionalize death by putting people in hospitals and then having a mortuary come and take the body, and just putting it at arm's length and not talk about it. So by bringing it back full circle, which is what we used to do, right? People would die and we'd lay them out in the living room, and they changed it to living room after that's where it used to be the parlor. They put the dead people in the So, oh wow, that is amazing.
So Spirit gave me an acronym for the word death, which I love, because it completely shifts this whole idea that death is a bad thing. And Spirit said death, DEATH, stands for divine expansion and total healing.
Oh, I love that.
Right? Because when you go through this transformation called death, it's like you unzip from this physical body and you emerge in your pure potential energy. The hard part, and this is when I work with my clients, the hard part I so understand the missing part, right? We miss the physical body. And so I teach people more about energy and how they can feel energy and how they can tune into their own energy and tune into the energy of their loved ones on the other side too. It does help the missing, but we still grieve this physical thing because this is the
Yes,
thing that we're used to.
that is correct.
Yeah.
That's to me the biggest problem, or just the sadness and the angst that people really suffer. It's the physicality of our loved one that is no longer here, and we don't have access to that. But I totally agree with you. I mean, the energy is just amazing. I mean, my husband comes to me as a dragonfly, and I have hundreds of stories of dragonflies coming to me, and my mom comes to me as a red cardinal, and there's a red cardinal that lives here in this little yard, and I mean, it fills my heart every time I get a sign like that. And I think, for people to be able to open themselves to receive the signs and to feel them present with them, even though it's not quite the same, it does lessen the
It does help.
severity of it all. Mm-hmm.
It does help. And I have clients who say to me, Sandy, I'm not getting any signs. I don't get it. I'm not seeing the signs. And I'm like, well, do a check-in. Oh, something just flew by you. I don't know if that was a bird or a dragonfly or something saying, hey.
Yeah. Hey, we're here.
So I ask people to do a check-in, like how busy and distracting is your life? Because the signs can be so subtle. And then I'll teach them how to go within and have an internal experience, which to me is so powerful. When you can go in and have a meeting of the reunion of the spirits, if you will.
Oh, that's
Very
beautiful.
healing.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Do you have a story about one of your clients maybe that comes to mind?
Yeah, this one woman whose son was he had gotten killed in a car accident, and she came in and she was so distraught, and she just said, obviously I just miss him so much, and I was bringing his energy through, and then I asked her if she would be willing to have an inner experience. And so I had her close her eyes, and I brought her into this beautiful space inside of her. And she said to me, I feel him, I see him. And so she started I was guiding her into this conversation with her son. And so while she was in it, and she got from him that, Mom, I didn't suffer, even though it was a car accident, I left my body so quickly. And it was different hearing it from him than it was hearing it from me. She's getting it directly from the source, right? So as she's in this conversation with her son, I asked her, tell me about the missing. What happens to this idea of missing him when you're right here with him? She's like, it's gone. It's gone. And so the challenge for her or for anyone then becomes, how can I have that experience again? And my belief is that energy is within and around all of us all the time. And so it breaks my heart when someone comes to me and says, can you tell my husband that I love him? I'm like, oh, you don't know that he can hear you just as much as he can hear me. She's like, oh, I thought only a medium could talk to them. I'm like, no. So we're all intrinsically connected. I had this other woman. She was so cute. She came in with her daughter, and her husband was in spirit, and he had been in spirit for 2 months. And when I first connected with him, the first thing he said was, please tell my wife not to feel guilty for not going to the cemetery. So I heard that, and I'm thinking, well, it's kind of general, right? But I have to give what I get. And I shared it with her, and she started sobbing. And I thought, wow, that must have struck some nerve inside of her. And she said, Sandy, you don't understand. I was visiting my husband at the cemetery every single day for the last couple of months, but for the last 2 weeks, I haven't gone because I've been so busy and I've felt so guilty. And then her husband said this. He said, please tell my wife, honey, if you go to the cemetery, I go to the cemetery. If you don't go to the cemetery, I don't go to the cemetery. She loved that because they don't live there. They're with us.
I love that so much because I think that is so true. People get fixated on, going and like to the cemetery or going to a memorial site or something like that because they feel like that's where they are, but they're not. They're with us all the time. And
all the time.
And I always tell the clients too, it's like if you think it's a sign, or if you suddenly start thinking of them out of the blue, they're there with you at that moment. Like seems like everyone's discounting, like, oh, they're not visiting me or this or that, but they are. It's just like you said, we're too busy, and people don't understand that when you think of them, they're thinking of you and all of those good things. I almost burst into tears when you said about the client saying, oh, I thought only mediums could give messages. I mean, it breaks my heart.
I know
so much. And that's part of why I'm not doing readings now. Like, I'm teaching people how to connect themselves. I don't like, I'm not any more special than anyone else. I just happened to, it just opened for me in a very quick, fast way, but I believe it's like playing piano. Anyone can learn to play the piano. Some people are just instantly really good at it, and other people need lessons and, structure on how to do it. But everybody has that capability.
I do believe that. Can I share another story?
Yes, please.
This one is like one of my favorite ones. It's a little out there, but it's so cool. So I was working with this woman whose brother was in spirit, and he had been apparently this famous heart surgeon here in Boston. And when I connected with him, he said the irony of his life was he had this heart defect from when he was a child. So he was living with this heart defect and ended up dying because of this heart defect, right? And here he was, a heart surgeon. And he said, I realized a couple of things. He said, I realized that I was putting so much attention on healing the physical heart. He said, I wasn't paying enough attention to my emotional heart. And then he said this, which was wild. He said, if I knew then what I know now about the world of spirit, I wouldn't have tried so hard to save so many people.
Wow.
I know.
Oh, that's so interesting. I recently just did a podcast, and it was with an ER doctor, and she said, our medical teams are taught that death is failure. Like, you do not want your patient to die. And so our system is so backwards. The majority of costs are in the last 6 weeks of somebody's life in medicine. And rather than, like, once we realize, like, people are going, like, embrace that, because they're going somewhere really amazing. They're going to be out of their pain. They're going to be out of their misery. And instead with drugs and machines, and it's just I hope that everyone can wake up.
I do too. And I feel like part of my role here is to help people to see death differently, because it's interesting. What I find is when someone goes through loss of a loved one, right, they're fine, right? Their loved one is fine. But my clients are like, well, I'm glad they're fine. My life is like in shambles right now. And so part of what I do is I teach people how to heal their heart by unraveling some of the stories that they have. A lot of times, like, there's so much guilt that people feel after they've gone through a loved one. I will never forget this one client. This woman's son was in spirit, and he also was killed by it was a car accident. And he kept saying, Mom, I'm right here. And his mother said, but Sandy, when he died, he was dragged 10 feet by the car. Now, he had passed years ago, and her son was saying, Mom, I'm right here. And she's like, yeah, but the accident, and it shouldn't have happened. And she kept looking like as if she was still in the past. And he's like, Mom, I'm right here. And it was interesting because there was a part of her that wouldn't allow herself to be present because of her pain in the past. And so that's part of what I do, is I just help bring people into the present moment and heal some of the stuff that's around their heart, so that they truly, this is where spirit connection is going to happen. It's going to happen right here in this moment.
In the present moment. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That's a beautiful, amazing story. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So she was so stuck in him being dragged those 10 feet that she was just invested in just, I don't know, holding that fear, that horror, that, like, I can't live with that. Right. And meanwhile, her son is saying, no, Mom, I'm not there. Let that go. And isn't that true for our lives? I mean, being present in the moment rather than all of our past or what's the future going to hold. It's all there is this moment that you and I are sharing right now, right here.
That's all that we have.
Yeah. And that's where spirit is.
What I hear a lot from, especially parents who have lost a child, right? I hear this a lot when someone young dies. there's this idea that we have in our minds that says that wasn't supposed to happen. Then someone is not supposed to die at a young age. They're supposed to be born here. You're supposed to have this long lifetime. And then it's okay if you die when you're old, because you're old and that's when you're supposed to die. That's what we have in our human mindset, right? Spirit says, no, it's on your soul contract, whether it's 31 days or 37 years or 25 years. But from our human mindset, we say, no, 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 they were supposed to live out this. And that becomes our conflict, fighting with what is. And so sometimes that's a hard one for people to accept, because they have this idea that, no, it wasn't supposed to happen. They're supposed to be still here physically, and they're not supposed to die yet. And I get it. I understand that. My heart goes out to parents who have lost a child. It's one of the hardest losses.
Right. Because we have it in our mind.
I don't know any of the loss.
Yeah. And right. Because we have it in our mind that, they missed out on whatever, right? Growing up, getting married, having children, like they missed that. And yet, but that, like you said, a soul contract, that wasn't part of their soul contract in this lifetime. Right. And how about also just being so grateful for the amount of time you did have with them, and just cherish that rather than being so focused on the one day that they left this earth, right? That's where people get really stuck and focused, is on that one day of death, rather than, wow, think of all the time, whether, short or long, that I did have with them.
And don't you find, Lisa, in your work, don't you find that a lot of times you hear people saying, yeah, but I didn't get to have the conversations that I wanted to have, or I didn't get to say goodbye. And I always say to people, it's never too late. Let's have the you can have these continued conversations at any time. In fact, there's less barriers and less distraction without the physical body. But I get it. We're so used to having this physical way of communicating. That's why, to me, meditation is so important, and teaching people how to do that, because when you tune in meditation, you're really tuning into the non-physical part of you. And you get to see, oh, there's more than meets the eye here. I'm not just this physical thing. And that's right. The beginning of it.
That is amazing. And I also, like, for me and my dad, who's passed, I have a much better relationship with him now than I ever did on the earth plane, because there were so many issues and things, in that situation. But yet in the spirit, it's like, wow, like it's so amazing. So you can redefine your relationship, if you didn't have a great one on this earth plane. And if people are open to exploring that, or to, just delving into that, it's pretty incredible to be able to heal that.
Do you know what I find too sometimes? When I bring through an energy from spirit for someone, right? And they'll come through very loving, because that's what they are. They're a very loving energy. And sometimes, they have to project what they were like when they were here for my clients.
To recognize them. Right. So they can recognize them.
So sometimes people have a hard time letting go of, or really embracing, what their loved one is like now compared to what they were like when they were here. Like, for instance, there was this one woman, I was connecting with her sister in spirit, and my clients asked a question about her sister's grandchild in the baptism, and the sister in spirit said, doesn't matter, whatever works for you all, doesn't matter to me if she is or isn't baptized in the Catholic Church. And my client's like, that's not my sister. She would never say that when she was here. She was very religious when she was here, because apparently the sister's daughter was ambivalent about whether or not to baptize her child in the Catholic Church. And I said, no, you don't understand. Your sister, when she was here, had those religious beliefs, but now in spirit, they see religion differently. They see that there's just more, it's just an energy of love, and they see it from a whole different perspective. And so I find sometimes that people have a hard time letting go of who they were, their loved one, the way they were, and embracing what they are now, so it's interesting, right?
It is interesting. And you know what it reminds me is, I've interviewed so many people with near-death experiences. And because when they've left their body and gone up and crossed into that beautiful unconditional love realm, and they see and know that life, that's all it's about, is love, is being here on this planet Earth. And then they come back and they're changed people, you
Yeah.
know? And so for their loved ones and for themselves, sometimes it's very difficult to, how do you start living that life when it's so different from from what society, you know, has thought you were always, you know, like who you were before.
Yeah.
But then them knowing that they can let go of, say, you know, their religion or whatever. And so it's really just so interesting.
So I would imagine with people who have had a near-death experience, right? So what's happening with them is they're in a whole different frequency, a whole different vibration, right? No limitations, pure potentiality, complete love. And then they're kind of squeezed back into this existence. It's
That's
like,
exactly what they say. They come back into their
right?
body, they feel like they're being put into a tight shoe or a hot cloth.
Yeah.
You know, they
Yeah.
have to pain themselves, and it's just crazy.
And I can imagine that when they come back, that they have to shift some parts of their life because energetically that their big soul doesn't fit into this little thing anymore. It reminds me of another session that I had done years ago where this young man, he had committed suicide and his family was all there for a session. And he said to me, "You have no idea the relief that I felt. It was the only way that I knew how to get out of the pain that I was in." And I loved the analogy he gave me. He said, and he was asking me to share it with them. He said, you know, when you're at Thanksgiving, right, after you have a huge Thanksgiving dinner and you're so full and you can't stand how tight your pants are, you go home and you undo your pants and you go, ah. He said, that was a feeling that I had. He had a great sense of humor. He's like, that's the feeling. And not to minimize it or,
Right.
dishonor his life or his death, but that's the way he shared it. He's like, that's what I felt, because he just couldn't fit into his soul couldn't fit into that mindset anymore. And so when
Right.
he was out of his body, it was like he went whoosh. Those I don't remember what they were called. They were these little sponge animals that
Oh,
fit
right.
inside a
Yeah.
capsule, right? You remember
Right.
those?
And
And
then
then you put it in
yes,
water and the whole
in
thing
water, and
expands. That's kind of like how I see us after we go through this transition called death. We're out of that capsule, like the capsule is our
that's
body, and we
right.
go whoosh.
That's a great analogy, I think, because based on all the interviews I've done, that's what most everyone tells me is what it feels like. I mean, even for me, you know, when I had my out of body experience and went to heaven, and I came back, like I didn't feel that fitting into a tight, you know, physical presence, but I definitely shifted something in my body, you know, energetically, as well as, I don't know if it was my DNA or what, but I couldn't eat the same things. I couldn't watch television the same way. And it's been ever evolving, but that now that I'm more in community with other people that have had out of body experiences and near death experiences, every time I hear somebody else's experience, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's happened to me too, you know? And so again, there's this whole tribe of people out there that have had these experiences, and so many don't share them because they think they're going to be, you know, thought of as crazy.
Mm-hmm.
But the more that people come out of the closet, so to speak, around their near-death experience or out-of-body experience or all their spiritual experiences, it opens everybody's eyes, and it's such a gift.
You know what occurs to me when you say that about your near-death experience, right? So I was given this idea of the different stages of soul awareness, the different, the first one is where we're feeling victimized because we're not really aware of the soul and we're feeling like everything happens to us, right? And then you advance the more you learn and you understand, and then you see, no, I can find the gifts in it, and I can find the gift in every experience, and I can let go of blame and resentment. And then you move up another level of awareness and you say like, oh, I can create what I want here. And then you move up to another level of awareness, and it's like, oh, I'm partnering with God, and God is moving through me as me, right? So what I was sensing as you were talking about your near-death experience, you shifted in complete awareness. And so
Yes.
even your physicality would change, because think about, here's what's just coming through right now. When we expand in our awareness of who we really are and the magnificent essence that we are, we hold our body different. Our voice is different, right? It affects us physically. It affects us emotionally because we're shifting out of the emotions that have kept us stuck. And so you were actually, I'm hearing, you were completely tuned into Christ consciousness also.
Yes. Oh my God, my whole
And
body's just chilling.
well, and I'd love to share this.
Yes.
Spirit recently gave me this idea that, they wanted to explain how it was that Jesus healed when he was here. And they said he held his, I have goosebumps right now, he held his vibration so high and so strong and so pure, he was vibrating in a frequency where illness didn't exist. And so when people came near him, they touched him or he touched them, because his frequency was so high and so strong, they started vibrating out of their illness into a place where illness didn't exist. It was a different frequency that they started vibrating in. And then they called it a miracle. And what I understand is we all are like that. We have Christ consciousness within us, available to us, if we are to let go of our blame and resentment and shame and hurt and pain. That is available to us. That same level of potentiality, the same level of healing for ourselves and for everyone around us.
Wow. I love that.
Mm.
So amazing. Oh my goodness. Well, hey, I love that reading that you just gave me. Can I pull some cards?
Sure. That'd be
And of
awesome.
course, the wind is picking up right now. I feel like that's confirmation of what you were just saying. Woo! As the computer starts going off the table here. All right, let me shuffle the cards and we'll see what Spirit has to say.
Cool.
All right, I gotta make sure that. Okay, and so what I'm getting is this is specifically about death and how much you help your clients and what kind of keeps people from being able to what keeps them victimized, in when they lose a loved one. And so the first card is always the blockage card, and it's delight. So of course, nobody's delightful, or, there's no delight in losing a loved one, in
Right.
no matter what, I mean, even if my husband was sick for 7 years, even when he died, I was not delighted. And yet there was a huge sense of relief because I just knew he was no longer in pain.
Right.
But really, so the action card is joy. And that's what both you and I, oh my God, I feel such emotion. Like you and I are spreading the joy around what death really is, and helping people like get rid of the illusion of what's been created for us. Or, even if you think about our media and the way that death is portrayed on television and movies and from all around, it's this doom and gloom and just it's darkness and sadness. And I mean, it perpetuates the myth that's out there. Whereas people like you and me who have experienced it and have seen that it's all an illusion, and to help people see the joy, I mean, I truly do believe when somebody passes, and I do hospice work, so I sit with patients in their last days, and when they take that last breath and transition over, I mean, it is a joyous moment. It is not, it's not doom and gloom. And so then the outcome is freedom, which is just, yeah. So once people are able to embrace this idea and yeah, deal with the emotion that comes up and the sadness and you don't want to just dismiss that or bury that, but to see the other side of the coin, right? That there is this beauty, that they've been released of this life, and that they're in the most amazing, beautiful, wonderful place, pure unconditional love. Yeah. And they can see a new way of interacting with their loved ones here on this earth.
That's beautiful. I have to tell you, when you showed me that first card, you said it's the blockage, right? The block.
Right.
Do you know what I saw and what I heard when you showed the card? They're blocking delight, not like delight, but the light. They're blocking the light.
Oh, right. You're absolutely right.
Don't block the light.
I love that. That's what it is. Yes, because
that's how I
people
hear
are blocking
things.
the light. Yes.
It's true though, right? And it's like,
it is.
What Spirit keeps showing me is that it's all about the heart that opens, right? And when you open your heart, that light can pour forth, right? Spirit can pour forth into your life.
Oh
Yeah,
my
that's
gosh.
awesome. Thank you.
I love that that's what you saw and heard. And it's so, oh my gosh, I love it. And
But it's
see,
true
and
that
to
we can
me,
go into our darkness.
yeah, absolutely. And to me, this is also spirit showing us the sense of humor, because spirit
Right.
is, I mean, they are the best comedians around. I mean, truly. Oh my goodness. Well, do you have something that you could share with anyone listening about if they have lost a loved one, if there's a technique or maybe just any thought you might have that might be able to help somebody right now if they're in pain around the loss of a loved one?
Yeah, a couple of things. Breath is really important. To just sit and breathe and to be with the emotion that's coming up, to allow it to move through. And I know people will say, yeah, but I'm crying all the time. And I get that, but it's going to come in like a wave, right? And your breath can move it. I also suggest that people have an honest to God conversation. Just have an honest conversation with God, whatever the God is of someone's understanding, and get angry, cry, whatever you need to do. And then listen for God's response. You know, whether you're doing it in a meditation or through your writing, allow God. Like people have said to me, Sandy, I know God's punishing me. Really? Have you asked God directly? Because not once ever has God ever said, yeah, this is happening as a punishment. But this is where we go in our minds. And it's the stories that we tell ourselves that are lies that are going to keep us in pain. So I just want people to know that death is not the end of someone, and grief is not the end of someone who is here.
That's beautiful. Oh my gosh, I love it. So tell the listeners how they can find you, and of course, I'll have the links on my blog post. But it's always nice for people
Sure.
listening.
They can reach me at my website, which is sandyalemian.com, and it's ALEMIAN, sandyalemian.com. They can also download a free ebook called The Other Side of Grief that will support them.
Oh, fantastic. Well,
Yeah,
this has been such a delight, Sandy. Thank you. A
it
delight.
has been. Bring in the light. Bring in
That's
the
right.
light. Thank you so much, Lisa. Thanks for the work that you do too.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. Thank you for listening to the Exploring Death podcast. This podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Before you make any financial or legal decisions, consult a professional. This show is copyrighted by Exploring Death. Written permission must be granted before syndication or rebroadcasting.